In this video, I am going to describe the demand conditions in the price discrimination game that you will play in the first lecture. I'll show you how we can derive the demand curves of the two buyers in that game and how to derive the market demand curve. Now in the game there are two buyers, A and B, and in the table we have the valuations of the two buyers. So let's start by looking at buyer A. So in the first part of this table we have the valuations of the two buyers. Now for buyer A, they're willing to pay £20 for one item. And it happens that they're also willing to pay just £20 for two items. This means they're not willing to pay any more for this second item. So the marginal valuation of the second item is 0, where 0 is just 20 minus 20, the difference between the valuations of one item and two items for buyer A. Buyer A's marginal valuation for the first item is £20. This is just the difference between buyer A's valuation for one item and buyer A's valuation for no items, which is 0. So how can we use this information to derive buyer A's demand? Well, on the left here, we can see buyer A's demand curve. So how did I get this? Well, let's think about the price. Now, if the price is more than 20, then buyer A is not willing to buy anything. This is because 20 is buyer A's marginal valuation of the first item. So if the extra, satisfaction or utility that buyer A gets from the first item were less than the price, then buyer A is better off not buying that first unit. However, when the price comes down below 20, it now becomes worthwhile for buyer A to buy that first item, because by buying that first item, buyer A is going to increase their consumer surplus. This is because the willingness to pay or valuation of buyer A for that item, the marginal valuation, is more than the price. Now, will buyer A ever buy the second item? Well, no, because the price is not going to be less than 0, right? So we're only looking at prices which are positive, or 0. And buyer A is only going to buy a second item if its price is 0. If the price is 0, buyer A is indifferent between buying or not, because their marginal valuation of the second item is 0. Now, let's look at a buyer B. Buyer B is willing to pay £30 for one item and £40 for two items. So this means that buyer B's marginal valuation of item 1 is 30. And buyer B's marginal valuation of item 2 is 10, because that's the difference between 40 and 30. The difference between B's valuation of two items and B's valuation of one item. So when B buys that second item, that increases their valuation by 10. Okay, so how then can we get B's demand curve? Well, we do the same sort of thing we did with A. So let's look at the demand curve here on the right. If the price is more than 30, which is what buyer B is willing to pay for the first item, then buyer B will not buy anything. Their demand is 0. But as soon as the price drops below 30, buyer B is going to buy either one item or two items. So when will buyer B buy one item? Well, they'll buy one item if the price is between 10 and 30, these two marginal valuations. Now that's because if the price were below 10, then buyer B would actually want to buy two items. The price being less than the marginal valuation means by consuming that second item, buyer B would increase their consumer surplus. The increase in their willingness to pay would be more than the increase in their expenditure. When the price is between 10 and 30, buyer B will buy one unit. So those are the individual demand curves. How then do we get the market demand curves? Well, we just add those two demand curves together horizontally. So if the price is more than 30, we see that neither of the consumers is going to buy anything, so demand will be 0. If the price becomes lower than 30, but more than 20, then buyer B will buy one item, but buyer A will buy nothing. So the market demand is 1. But when the price now becomes lower than 20, buyer A will also buy something. Right? So as long as the price is between 10 and 20, so that buyer A wants to buy 1 unit, but buyer B doesn't want to buy their second unit, they only still want to buy 1, then the market demand will be 2. And then when the price drops below 10, then buyer B will want to buy 2 units, and buyer A still wants to buy 1 unit, so the demand will be 3. The demand could possibly only be 4 units if the price is 0, so that possibly buyer A wants to buy something. So just to note, in these demand curves, I've assumed that if the price is equal to the marginal valuation, then the consumer will buy that unit. That is, if the consumer is indifferent between buying something or not, then I assume they do buy. Okay, so that's how to derive the individual demand curves and the market demand curve given the valuations of buyers. So to sum up, to find the demand curves, you take the valuation of the buyer, find the marginal valuations, and essentially plot the marginal valuations.